The Galactic Council was holding one of its most important meetings yet. The chamber floated above a massive planet, a place where representatives from countless species gathered to discuss the fate of the galaxy. Its walls shimmered with energy, displaying holograms of planets, star systems, and trade routes. Each member, no matter how small or large their species, had a seat here, a voice that mattered, or so it was supposed to. The council was in the middle of a long debate about trade agreements, border disputes, and new planetary laws when an urgent message arrived. The room fell silent as the hologram flickered to life, showing a simple, stark statement from Earth. Humans were severing all diplomatic relations with the council. The words were short, but their meaning was explosive. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, almost unbearable. Then murmurs began, soft at first, and then louder, as the representatives tried to process what had just happened. Humans were known for their unpredictability, but no one had expected them to take such a decisive step. The council had dealt with minor disagreements before. They had dealt with protests and threats, and even small wars between species, but nothing like this. Humans were walking away completely, refusing to answer any calls, ignoring all messages, and abandoning all previous agreements. Some council members shook their heads in disbelief. "This can't be real," said a tall, slender being with translucent skin, its voice echoing like wind through a cave. "Humans are not supposed to do this. They are supposed to negotiate, to compromise. They don't just disappear from diplomacy." Another, a heavily armored creature with 4 eyes that could see in multiple spectrums, growled. "I told you. They are unpredictable. We should have seen this coming. They always act on their own terms." But even among the skeptics, there was confusion. What had driven humans to take such drastic action? The council had always treated them fairly, or at least they had thought so. Humans had faced threats from other species, from rogue traders, and even from natural disasters. Yet they had survived, adapted, and often thrived. And now, in one bold move, they had stepped away from the center of galactic politics entirely. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the decision had been anything but sudden. Humans had watched the council for decades, observing the endless debates, the slow-moving policies, and the hidden agendas. They had grown tired of meetings that led nowhere, of promises that were broken, and of a system that often seemed more interested in politics than in justice or survival. There had been arguments, heated discussions, and disagreements among themselves, but in the end, humanity reached a conclusion. They would no longer allow their fate to be dictated by an organization that often seemed more concerned with appearances than action. Humans had always been known for their resilience, their ability to adapt, and their courage in the face of uncertainty. They were not afraid of challenges, nor were they willing to compromise their principles for convenience. And so, the decision to sever diplomacy was both bold and calculated. It was meant to send a message, not a message of aggression, but a message of independence. Humans wanted the galaxy to know that they would no longer wait for approval, that they would no longer rely on the council to protect their interests, and that they would chart their own path, no matter how difficult it might be. Back in the council chamber, chaos began to unfold. Representatives shouted over one another, their voices a mixture of anger, fear, and confusion. Some demanded immediate action, calling for fleets to be deployed and communications to be restored. Others argued for caution, suggesting that perhaps this was a bluff, a test, or a miscommunication. The council leader, a wise and aged being whose skin shimmered like molten gold, tried to regain control, but even their calm presence could not quell the rising panic. "We need to understand their reasoning," the leader said, their voice steady but tinged with concern. "Humans do not act without purpose. There must be a reason behind this, and we must find it before it is too late." But finding that reason was proving difficult. Humans had always been private in their dealings, often keeping their plans close to the chest. While other species tried to predict human behavior based on patterns in history, humans often acted in ways that defied expectation. Their decisions were guided not by tradition or protocol, but by necessity, ethics, and sometimes a stubborn sense of justice. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. News networks, message networks, and even private communications buzzed with speculation. Traders, scientists, soldiers, and ordinary citizens alike tried to make sense of what had happened. Humans had cut ties not with hostility, but with an unspoken declaration. They were no longer interested in being controlled or constrained. It was a statement of independence, and it shook the galaxy to its core. Some species were fearful. They worried that humans might take aggressive action next, perhaps even wage war against the Council or other civilizations. Others were more curious than afraid, wondering what humans might do with their newfound freedom. Would they create new alliances? Would they establish their own rules? Would they become a force that could not be ignored? Inside the Council, the debate grew louder. Representatives called for emergency meetings, for urgent summits, and for immediate strategies to deal with the human decision. But no one had a clear answer. No one knew how to respond to humans because humans had always been different. They did not follow predictable paths. They did not always play by the same rules as everyone else. And now, in this single act, they had once again proven that the galaxy could not fully understand them. Amidst the chaos, a small group of council members quietly observed, trying to piece together the truth. They studied human history, their culture, their past decisions, and their behavior in previous crises. Slowly, a realization began to form. Humans were not making a mistake. This was not recklessness or impulsiveness. This was a deliberate, thoughtful choice. Humans had weighed their options, considered the consequences, and decided that stepping away from diplomacy was the best path forward. The Council had faced threats before, from powerful species, from rebels, from natural disasters. But nothing had prepared them for this. Humans were not just another species. They were bold, adaptable, and surprisingly resilient. And now, as they removed themselves from the web of intergalactic politics, the Council realized that they were dealing with a force unlike any other, a force that could not be controlled, predicted, or intimidated. Hours passed, and the chamber remained tense. Some representatives tried to make contact, sending messages and envoys, but there was no response. The humans had truly cut ties, leaving the Council in a state of unprecedented uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, fear began to grow, not just fear of what humans might do, but fear of what the galaxy had lost. Humans had always been unpredictable, but they had also been reliable allies when it suited them. They had negotiated, fought, and sacrificed when necessary. Their departure was not just a political move. It was a message that the galaxy had underestimated them for too long. And now, with diplomacy severed, the Council would have to face the reality that humans were no longer bound by the rules, treaties, or expectations that had governed interstellar relations for centuries. By the end of the day, the chamber was still in chaos, but a quiet understanding began to settle among some of the Council members. Humans were gone from the table, yes, but they were not gone from the galaxy. They were out there, observing, planning, and moving forward on their own terms. And the Council had to prepare not just for negotiations, but for a future where humans were no longer just participants in galactic affairs. They were independent, self-reliant, and capable of shaping the future themselves. For the first time in history, the Council felt something it rarely experienced: genuine uncertainty. And that uncertainty was terrifying. After the shockwaves of their announcement rippled through the galaxy, humans turned their attention inward. The decision to sever all diplomatic ties had not come lightly. It had been carefully considered for years, debated in countless meetings, and weighed against every possible consequence. The Council's panic was not a surprise to those who had truly studied the humans. They were a species that valued freedom, independence, and above all, their own judgment. The Council had always thought of humans as unpredictable, sometimes reckless, but capable allies when necessary. Yet humans had grown tired of the slow, often ineffective mechanisms of interstellar diplomacy. They had watched as crises unfolded across the galaxy, conflicts that could have been prevented, lives lost because negotiations dragged on for months or years. They had seen the Council promise solutions and deliver little. At first, humans tried to work within the system. They sent representatives, participated in committees, and even offered technology and intelligence to help maintain peace. But over time, they realized that their efforts were often ignored or slowed by bureaucracy and politics. In private chambers on Earth, humans discussed the future. Some were frustrated, angered by the Council's manipulation, while others were calm, analytical, thinking through every possible outcome. There were debates, sometimes heated, about what this decision would mean for humanity. Some feared retaliation, others worried about isolation. But all agreed on one point: the galaxy had underestimated them for too long. And it was time to act in their own interest. Humans had always valued adaptability. Unlike many species in the Council, they were not bound by tradition or rigid protocols. They learned quickly, adjusted to changing circumstances, and made decisions that served their long-term survival rather than short-term approval. This quality had helped them survive countless threats, from natural disasters to hostile alien incursions. Now, it would serve them in their greatest challenge yet, proving that they could thrive without the Council's guidance or interference. The decision was as much philosophical as it was practical. Humans had observed that diplomacy often came at a cost. It required compromises that sometimes went against their principles. They had been asked to mediate disputes, to share their technology, and to intervene in situations where other species' agendas did not align with justice or logic. Sometimes these actions had benefited the galaxy, but at other times they had come at a price that humans were no longer willing to pay. By severing ties, humans were asserting a new standard. Their cooperation could not be assumed, and their independence could not be ignored. As the news of their decision reached the farthest corners of human society, ordinary citizens reacted in ways that reflected the human spirit. Some were anxious, worried about the unknown dangers of isolation. They feared that other species might retaliate, or that the galaxy might see them as weak. Others felt a sense of pride, recognizing that humans were taking control of their destiny. Schools, media outlets, and social platforms buzzed with discussion, debate, and speculation. People analyzed every possible consequence, and yet there was an underlying confidence that humanity could survive and even thrive on its own. Technology and innovation became central to this new phase of human strategy. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to improve defenses, explore new territories, and develop sustainable resources. Plans for independent trade networks, research stations on distant planets, and advanced communication systems were set into motion. Humans wanted to demonstrate that they did not need approval or guidance to succeed. Every decision, every innovation, was a message to the galaxy. Humans were strong, capable, and unbound by traditional diplomacy. But it wasn't just about technology. Humans also focused on their culture, their identity, and their values. They understood that survival was more than building machines or expanding territory. It was about staying true to themselves. Education systems emphasized critical thinking, problem-solving, and resilience. Communities worked together to ensure safety, share knowledge, and maintain morale. Even in the face of uncertainty, humans relied on their social bonds, their empathy, and their ability to cooperate in ways that other species sometimes could not understand. The Council, meanwhile, struggled to interpret the humans' motives. They assumed that severing ties was an act of anger, perhaps even fear. Some council members predicted aggression, imagining that humans would retaliate against any perceived slight. Others believed it was a bluff, a temporary measure to gain leverage in future negotiations. But none could fully comprehend the reasoning behind humans' decision. Unlike many species, humans did not act solely out of fear, ambition, or desire for control. They acted from principle, from careful thought, and from a desire to protect their own interests without harming others unnecessarily. Humans also prepared for possible retaliation or misunderstandings. Defensive measures were enhanced, fleets were upgraded, and communication protocols were established not to threaten others, but to ensure that humans could respond to any threat while continuing to focus on their independent goals. They were aware that stepping away from diplomacy could create tension, but they believed that confidence, preparedness, and rational action would allow them to navigate whatever challenges came next. Interestingly, humans did not view their decision as abandonment. They were not leaving the galaxy. They were simply choosing a different path. They would continue to observe events, learn from other species, and engage in trade or communication when it aligned with their interests. This nuanced approach confounded the Council. Humans were not isolating themselves entirely, nor were they acting aggressively. They were simply prioritizing their autonomy. Across the galaxy, rumors spread. Some species tried to predict human actions based on history, culture, or previous interactions. They imagined humans as impulsive, violent, or reckless. Yet these assumptions were almost always wrong. Humans had shown time and again that they could combine caution with boldness, intelligence with intuition, and resilience with innovation. The more other species speculated, the more uncertain they became, and that uncertainty played into human strategy. Whether intentionally or not, humans were also aware of the importance of perception. They knew that fear and respect could be powerful tools, not for intimidation, but for creating space and opportunity. By stepping away from diplomacy, they forced the Council and other species to reconsider their assumptions. Humans were no longer just participants in galactic politics. They were independent actors, capable of influencing events even without formal alliances or agreements. The decision also fostered internal unity. Humans realized that while the galaxy might misunderstand them, their strength came from working together, trusting one another, and combining their unique talents. Communities collaborated on projects, shared knowledge, and supported one another in ways that emphasized resilience and adaptability. This internal cohesion made the human decision even more powerful. While the Council panicked, humans calmly prepared for the future they had chosen. Months passed, and the initial shock began to settle. The Council continued to debate, send messages, and attempt to understand humans, but the humans themselves were already moving forward. Independent trade networks were established, research stations became operational, and communication hubs connected distant planets without relying on Council infrastructure. Humans demonstrated that they could thrive, innovate, and solve problems on their own despite their growing independence. Humans remained cautious, observing the galaxy, learning, and preparing for any potential conflicts. They understood that removing themselves from formal diplomacy carried risks, but they also understood that their resilience, adaptability, and unity would allow them to face any challenge. The Council's panic had revealed a truth humans already knew. The galaxy often underestimated them. Now, humans were proving that underestimation could be a powerful advantage. By the end of this period, humans had made it clear that they were not leaving the galaxy. They were redefining their place within it. They were no longer dependent on the Council's approval, treaties, or decisions. They would engage on their terms, according to their values, and with their own interests in mind. The Council, in contrast, remained in disarray. struggling to understand a species that refused to conform to expectations. Humans had chosen independence, not out of rebellion, but out of vision. They believed in their ability to survive, adapt, and succeed without interference. They understood that autonomy was not isolation, but a path to strength, innovation, and respect. And as they moved forward, quietly, strategically, and with confidence, the galaxy began to take notice. Humans were no longer just participants in the grand interstellar game. They were players who could shape the rules, define their path, and influence the future in ways that others had not anticipated. As the news of humans severing all diplomatic ties spread, the galaxy descended into a state of unease. Communication hubs buzzed with frantic messages, news channels raced to report the event, and the council's chambers became a storm of panic. Every species, no matter how small or large, began to question what this meant for their future. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also influential, capable, and, in ways that few species fully understood, incredibly powerful. Thought that they had stepped away from diplomacy entirely left many leaders and citizens uneasy. In countless worlds, governments held emergency meetings. Some species increased their military readiness, sending fleets to patrol borders and protect key systems. Rumors spread that humans might launch strikes or take aggressive action against anyone who challenged them. Merchants fretted that trade routes would be disrupted. Scientists worried that collaborations on technology, medicine, and research might collapse. Families speculated about the unknown consequences, wondering if life as they knew it would change forever. Within the Galactic Council, the tension was nearly unbearable. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding immediate action, others calling for calm analysis. "We cannot let this stand," one leader barked, a creature with multiple tentacles waving in frustration. "Humans cannot simply withdraw and leave us to manage the galaxy alone. This is unacceptable." Another voice, calm but stern, reminded the Council of human history. "Do you not remember? Humans survive against odds that would destroy many other species. They are resilient, clever, and adaptable. We must be cautious. Panic will only worsen the situation." But caution was in short supply. Many species had long relied on human cooperation. Humans had contributed technology that made faster travel possible, defended worlds from dangerous threats, and mediated conflicts that might have escalated into wars. Without humans, the Council suddenly felt vulnerable. Some members admitted, in hushed tones, that the galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. And now, the consequences were becoming painfully clear. News agencies across star systems began broadcasting stories about human withdrawal. Some reports painted humans as reckless, impulsive, or even dangerous. Others were more analytical, noting that humans had carefully weighed their decisions and likely had reasons that went beyond emotion. Across planets, citizens debated the meaning of this decision. Many were fearful, imagining human retaliation or a sudden disruption of peace. Others admired the humans' boldness, secretly wishing their own species could act with such independence and clarity. Military commanders began preparing for every possible scenario. Fleets were put on high alert, and war games simulated human attacks on vital outposts. Yet at the same time, intelligence reports showed no signs of aggression from humans. They were not mobilizing fleets to conquer or threaten. They were simply reorganizing their priorities, focusing inward on technology, research, and self-sufficiency. This confused many because humans' actions rarely matched others' assumptions. They were independent but not hostile, firm but not cruel, and strategic but rarely predictable. Diplomatic channels, once filled with routine updates and negotiations, now overflowed with urgent pleas. Envoys were dispatched in every direction, attempting to re-establish communication or at least understand the reasoning behind humans' withdrawal. Messages were sent at the speed of light, and some even traveled through experimental wormhole channels, yet no response came. Humans had made it clear they would engage on their terms, and for now, that meant silence. Some species grew frustrated, interpreting human silence as arrogance or defiance. Others began to admire the humans' courage, recognizing that stepping away from bureaucracy and politics required confidence and clarity of purpose. Discussions erupted not only about humans' actions, but about what the withdrawal revealed about other species' dependence on them. Many realized for the first time that humans were central to the balance of power in the galaxy. Without them, alliances were weaker, trade was more fragile, and conflicts were more likely to escalate. Amid the chaos, certain council members quietly observed, taking notes, analyzing patterns, and trying to learn from humans' decision. They understood that humans had acted not out of anger, fear, or impulsiveness, but out of principle and strategy. Humans valued freedom, self-reliance, and fairness. They acted to protect their interests, yes, but they did so in ways that minimized unnecessary harm. The more the Council tried to predict human behavior based on fear or aggression, the more they realized their assumptions were flawed. Humans could not be controlled or coerced. They acted according to their own judgment, and that judgment was often ahead of everyone else's. Meanwhile, the public reaction across the galaxy was equally varied. On some planets, people worried about their own security, imagining how the humans' departure might destabilize local systems. On others, citizens debated what this meant for progress and innovation. Humans had contributed immensely to interstellar technology, communication networks, and research partnerships. Without them, some feared a slowdown in discovery, or even the loss of critical knowledge. Yet others argued that humans' withdrawal might force species to become more self-reliant, innovate faster, and strengthen their own communities. Economic systems were affected too. Trade routes that relied on human technology or cooperation were temporarily disrupted. Markets fluctuated as merchants tried to predict the long-term impact. Some feared shortages of resources, while others speculated that new opportunities might arise for those willing to adapt. Human ingenuity was a force that influenced not only politics and defense, but also the economy, science, and culture of the galaxy. Their absence was felt immediately, even without any direct confrontation. Across the council chamber, heated debates continued. Some representatives argued for reconciliation, urging that humans be contacted again, that compromises be offered, or that reassurances be given. Others warned that doing so might backfire. The humans had deliberately stepped back to assert independence and would resist any attempts to manipulate or pressure them. These debates reflected a growing awareness. Humans were not just another species in the council. They were a unique force, capable of reshaping the balance of power simply by choosing how to engage or not engage with others. The council's fear was not just about humans' capabilities. It was about what humans represented: independence, adaptability, courage. These were traits many species admired, but rarely possessed themselves. In trying to predict human behavior, the council members realized that they had been relying on assumptions that no longer held true. Humans were no longer participants in the council's games. They had stepped outside, observing from a distance, and letting the galaxy see that power was not always about fleets, votes, or treaties. It was also about the will to act decisively, thoughtfully, and independently. As time passed, some council members began to change their approach. They stopped sending frantic messages and started observing, trying to learn from humans' example. Some species quietly began to emulate human strategies, focusing on self-reliance, innovation, and internal strength. Yet even as others followed their lead, the humans themselves moved forward without fanfare, quietly demonstrating that independence was not reckless. It was powerful, sustainable, and effective. The more the galaxy panicked, the more humans seemed calm. They continued building, exploring, and preparing. Their fleets were not aggressive. Their research stations were not hostile. Humans focused on advancement and resilience, proving that their withdrawal from diplomacy did not mean weakness. On the contrary, it demonstrated their capacity to thrive without reliance on anyone else. Across star systems, species debated, strategized, and speculated, but the human silence remained steadfast. The Council's panic had revealed a truth that could no longer be ignored. Humans could not be fully understood or controlled. They were a force of their own making, and the galaxy had to adjust to their presence, not as predictable allies or enemies, but as independent actors capable of influencing events in ways that no one had anticipated. Even as fear and uncertainty spread, a quiet admiration began to take root. Humans had taken control of their destiny, prioritized their principles, and prepared for the future without seeking approval. That combination of boldness and careful planning inspired both awe and caution. Across the galaxy, species realized that humans' actions were a lesson in resilience, strategy, and independence. The Council's panic had highlighted not only humans' power, but also their wisdom, foresight, and ability to navigate the complex web of galactic politics on their own terms. By the end of this period, the galaxy had shifted in subtle but profound ways. Governments were more cautious, alliances were reconsidered, and even ordinary citizens began to see humans as a unique force whose decisions could not be ignored. Fear, respect, and curiosity intertwined, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation. Humans had proven that stepping away from diplomacy did not mean stepping away from influence. On the contrary, their independence had strengthened their position in ways that left the Council scrambling to catch up. Humans were no longer just a participant in galactic affairs. They were a presence to be reckoned with, a reminder that true strength oft. While the rest of the galaxy panicked, humans quietly focused on their own strategy. Their withdrawal from diplomacy was not a moment of anger or fear. It was a calculated decision, carefully planned to protect their future and strengthen their position. Every step they took was measured, deliberate, and aimed at proving that independence did not mean weakness. Humans began by enhancing their technology and infrastructure. Research stations, previously managed in coordination with the Galactic Council, were upgraded to operate independently. Scientists worked tirelessly, developing advanced propulsion systems, better energy sources, and defensive technologies that could protect human settlements from potential threats. These improvements were not just for safety, they were a message. Humans wanted the galaxy to understand that they were capable of thriving without reliance on others. Trade and supply networks were also redesigned. Previously, humans had depended on Council-approved routes and partnerships for transporting goods, resources, and information. Now, they established independent channels, connecting distant colonies and research hubs without involving any Council intermediaries. These new networks were efficient, secure, and adaptive, reflecting human skill at solving complex problems. Traders who once feared isolation found themselves part of a system that was more flexible and reliable than anything the Council had offered. Humans also focused on defense, but not in the way many species expected. They did not amass fleets to intimidate or conquer. Instead, they built smart, adaptable defenses, designed to protect themselves if necessary while avoiding unnecessary conflict. Automated patrol systems monitored borders. Early warning networks detected potential threats, and strategic bases were positioned to maximize security. Humans understood that strength was not always about aggression. Sometimes it was about being prepared, adaptable, and resilient. Beyond technology and defense, humans prioritized exploration and expansion. They launched missions to study uncharted systems, gather knowledge about distant planets, and establish small outposts that could sustain life independently. Each mission was carefully planned, with multiple contingencies and backup systems. Humans believed that knowledge and presence were just as important as power. By exploring and learning, they not only secured resources, but also demonstrated that they could operate without the Council's support. Education and training became a cornerstone of their strategy. Humans understood that survival and progress depended on people, not just machines or technology. Schools, universities, and specialized training programs emphasized critical thinking, problem-solving, and adaptability. Young humans were taught to think for themselves, to question assumptions, and to make decisions that balanced risk with opportunity. This emphasis on intellectual and practical growth ensured that every human had the tools to contribute to the larger strategy. Reinforcing the society's independence, humans also invested in communication and intelligence. While they had cut off diplomatic channels, they maintained careful observation of the galaxy. Sensors, satellites, and listening posts monitored movements, conflicts, and developments across star systems. Humans gathered information not to control others, but to anticipate challenges and opportunities. By understanding the galaxy without being entangled in its politics, they could act decisively when necessary and avoid unnecessary risks. Interestingly, humans did not isolate themselves socially or culturally. They continued to engage with other species in ways that aligned with their values and interests. Scientific collaborations, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges were selectively pursued, but always on human terms. This approach baffled the Council and other species. Humans were not avoiding interaction entirely. They were simply refusing to participate in systems that compromised their autonomy or ignored their principles. Their actions sent a clear message. Humans could be allies, partners, or collaborators, but they would not be controlled or taken for granted. Human strategy was also psychological. They understood the importance of perception and influence. By stepping away from diplomacy, they forced the Council and other species to reassess assumptions. Humans were not reckless. They were independent. They were not aggressive. They were deliberate. This subtle demonstration of strength created uncertainty, which in turn discouraged potential aggression or manipulation. Other species began to realize that underestimating humans could be dangerous, and that humans' independence made them unpredictable in ways that were both challenging and impressive. Internally, humans focused on unity and morale. They understood that independence required trust and cooperation within their own society. Communities worked together to maintain security, share resources, and solve problems collectively. Projects were collaborative, with individuals contributing according to their skills and expertise. This internal cohesion became a source of strength. While the galaxy panicked and the Council scrambled, humans quietly strengthened themselves from within, proving that society could be resilient, innovative, and adaptable. Humans also used this period to reflect on long-term goals. They evaluated what they wanted for their species, for their colonies, and for their place in the galaxy. These discussions were not rushed. Humans understood that short-term panic or reaction could compromise the future. Instead, they made decisions with foresight, carefully balancing ambition with caution. Their long-term vision was clear. Humans would thrive independently, influence the galaxy through their actions, and secure their future without reliance on external approval. In addition to practical strategies, humans embraced innovation in governance and leadership. Decisions were made with input from diverse perspectives, combining experience, expertise, and insight from multiple disciplines. Leaders were chosen for competence, judgment, and ability to think critically, rather than for political loyalty or hierarchy. This approach created a government that was agile, responsive, and aligned with the broader goals of independence and resilience. Humans also anticipated potential threats. They studied the Council, other species, and even internal challenges, preparing responses for a variety of scenarios. They were ready to defend themselves if attacked, negotiate if approached strategically, or expand if opportunity arose. Every action was calculated, ensuring that humans could maintain autonomy while still participating in the galaxy on their own terms. Despite their focus on strategy, humans did not ignore ethics or values. Their plans emphasized sustainability, fairness, and respect for life. Expansion and exploration were balanced with the need to protect ecosystems, respect intelligent species, and maintain ethical standards. Humans believed that strength without integrity was meaningless, and that their independence should not come at the cost of the principles they valued most. As humans implemented their strategy, the rest of the galaxy struggled to keep up. The Council remained in disarray, trying to interpret actions that were deliberate, calculated, and often invisible to outside observers. Other species reacted with a mix of fear, admiration, and confusion. Some attempted to imitate humans' independence, while others feared being left behind. Yet humans continued quietly, steadily, and effectively, proving that action without fanfare could be more powerful than panic or spectacle. Through all of this, humans demonstrated a fundamental truth. Independence was not recklessness, and autonomy was not weakness. They showed that a society could thrive without constant approval, that innovation could flourish outside traditional systems, and that courage and foresight could guide action in uncertain times. Each step they took strengthened their position, inspired confidence among their own people, and reinforced the reality that the galaxy had underestimated them for too long. By the end of this period, humans had transformed their withdrawal from diplomacy into a strategic advantage. Their independence was no longer a threat to themselves. It was a tool to build strength, secure resources, and demonstrate capability. Other species began to recognize that humans were not just participants in galactic politics, but independent actors capable of shaping events on their own terms. The Council's panic, once intense and immediate, began to fade into cautious respect as they observed humans moving steadily forward. Confident, prepared, and unshakable, human strategy in this period was comprehensive, balanced, and visionary. It included technology, defense, exploration, education, intelligence, communication, governance, ethics, and long-term planning. Every decision reinforced their independence, strengthened their society, and created opportunities for the future. While the rest of the galaxy reacted with fear, humans acted with clarity, focus, and purpose. And in doing so, they redefined what it meant to be independent, resilient, and capable in a universe that had often underestimated them. In the end, humans did not just survive the Council's panic, they thrived. Their independence became their strength. Their careful planning, adaptability, and foresight ensured that stepping away from diplomacy was not a loss, but a powerful step forward. And while the galaxy debated, feared, and speculated, humans quietly, decisively, and effectively secured their place as a force to be reckoned with, capable of shaping the future on their own terms. As humans quietly strengthened their position, the Galactic Council was forced to confront a reality they had long ignored. At first, they had assumed that human withdrawal was a temporary flare of emotion, a brief protest that would eventually be resolved through negotiation. But as weeks turned into months, and humans continued to advance independently, panic gave way to a deep, unsettling awareness. Humans were serious, and the galaxy had underestimated them. The council chambers were filled with tension. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy gathered in urgent sessions, their voices rising and falling in a chaotic symphony of concern, frustration, and fear. Some species accused the humans of arrogance, claiming that severing ties was a reckless act that could destabilize the delicate balance of power. Others admitted, reluctantly, that humans' decision was not reckless at all. It was calculated, deliberate, and effective. The council had misjudged a species they believed they could predict, and that misjudgment was becoming painfully clear. One by one, council members voiced their concerns. A representative with iridescent wings argued that humans had always been underestimated, and that their technological advancements now gave them a significant advantage. "We have relied on them for too long," the representative said, wings fluttering nervously. "Without humans, we are weaker than we realized. We must consider their capabilities carefully before we act." Another member, a towering figure with multiple limbs, expressed frustration. "We tried to understand them, to negotiate, to include them in our plans. And yet they left. They act according to their own rules. This is not defiance, it is power." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of those words sank in. Power. Humans had turned their withdrawal from diplomacy into a demonstration of their strength, and the council was forced to acknowledge it. As the days passed, the council began to analyze humans' moves more closely. They saw how quickly humans had established independent trade networks, upgraded their technology, and expanded their presence across distant star systems. They observed humans' ability to defend themselves without aggression, their focus on knowledge, and their strategic foresight. Every action humans took reinforced a simple truth: independence had not weakened them, it had made them stronger, more capable, and more resilient. This realization sparked a mixture of fear and envy among council members. Some species wished they had acted with the same decisiveness, the same vision, and the same unity. Others feared that humans' independence would shift the balance of power in the galaxy, creating a situation in which the council itself was no longer in control. For centuries, the council had assumed that they could guide, influence, and regulate interstellar affairs. Humans' withdrawal challenged that assumption, exposing vulnerabilities and forcing a reevaluation of authority. Emergency meetings were convened to discuss possible responses. Some members proposed sending envoys again, hoping that humans could be persuaded to rejoin diplomatic channels. Others suggested more aggressive measures, including blockades or coordinated pressure to force compliance. Yet there was no consensus. Every proposal was weighed against the reality of humans' capabilities and strategy. They were not impulsive, nor were they weak. They acted with intelligence, foresight, and careful calculation. And any attempt to coerce them could backfire disastrously. As debates continued, a few council members began to advocate for a different approach: observation. Rather than trying to control or pressure humans, they suggested studying their actions, understanding their strategies, and learning from them. Humans had demonstrated qualities the council often lacked: unity, adaptability, and foresight, and these qualities could be instructive. This idea was met with skepticism at first, but over time it gained support. Humans had proven that stepping away from the council did not mean retreat or failure. It meant building strength on one's own terms. Meanwhile, rumors of humans' progress spread across the galaxy. Other species began to notice the efficiency of human trade networks, the sophistication of their technology, and the resilience of their colonies. Some species that had once dismissed humans as chaotic or disorganized now found themselves reassessing their assumptions. Humans were not only surviving, they were thriving. The Council's panic had alerted the galaxy to humans' independence, and that independence was increasingly seen as a model of strategic success. Inside the council chambers, tension escalated. Representatives debated not just humans' capabilities, but the broader implications of their independence. If humans could thrive without the council, what did that mean for the authority and relevance of the council itself? Could other species follow humans' example? Were humans' actions a warning, a challenge, or an inspiration? These questions created political ripples that no one had anticipated. Alliances were reconsidered, policies were reevaluated, and council members found themselves facing the uncomfortable truth. Humans had changed the rules of the game. Some council members, recognizing the shifting power dynamics, advocated for caution. They warned that any aggressive action against humans could provoke retaliation, destabilize regions, or even spark conflict on a scale the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Others argued that humans were unlikely to act aggressively, and that their independence was a sign of calculated restraint rather than hostility. Even as opinions varied, one point was clear: humans were no longer a species that could be easily controlled. Underestimated or ignored, the Council's internal divisions grew, reflecting both fear and admiration. Some representatives expressed resentment, believing that humans' independence had undermined the Council's authority. Others quietly admitted that human strategy was brilliant, and that their actions should be studied and understood. Across species, discussions shifted from criticism to analysis. Humans had demonstrated that autonomy, when combined with foresight, unity, and intelligence, could be more powerful than traditional diplomacy, influence, or coercion. At the same time, humans continued their quiet, deliberate work. They expanded colonies, upgraded defenses, advanced technology, and explored new star systems. Every success reinforced the reality of their independence. They did not announce their victories with fanfare or threats. They simply acted. The Council watched, growing increasingly aware that humans were not motivated by fear, revenge, or ambition. They were motivated by principle, foresight, and a commitment to their own future. This realization changed the Council's perspective. Fear was gradually replaced by respect, and admiration began to emerge alongside caution. Humans had taken control of their destiny, and they had done so with intelligence, patience, and careful planning. Their independence was not an act of defiance alone. It was a demonstration of capability and vision. The Council had misjudged humans for too long, and now they were forced to recognize the consequences. Some Council members began to voice a new idea: that humans should not be pressured or coerced, but observed and learned from. Human strategy was effective because it combined independence with foresight, resilience, and ethical principles. By studying these qualities, the Council and other species could gain insight into how to strengthen their own societies, defend their interests, and navigate the challenges of interstellar politics. Humans had become a model, whether intentionally or not, for how to balance autonomy, strategy, and ethical responsibility. The more the Council observed, the clearer it became that humans' independence had shifted the balance of power. The galaxy was no longer centered solely on the Council's authority. Humans, through their deliberate and careful actions, had become a force that could not be ignored. Every technological advancement, every new colony, every innovation reinforced the reality that humans were independent actors capable of influencing events across the stars. By the end of this period, the Council had begun to accept a difficult truth. Humans were no longer simply participants in galactic affairs. They were shapers of them. Their withdrawal from diplomacy had not weakened them. It had strengthened them. Their careful planning, innovation, and foresight had turned independence into a demonstration of power. The Council, once confident in its authority, now faced a future in which humans could not be easily controlled, predicted, or dismissed. Humans had changed the game. The Council's panic had given way to reckoning as members realized that the galaxy itself had shifted. Independence, strategic thinking, and unity had become forces to be reckoned with, and humans had demonstrated these qualities in a way that no other species had. The implications were profound. The Council had to rethink its strategies, alliances, and assumptions. They had to acknowledge that humans were not just players in the galactic system. They were independent actors capable of shaping the future in ways that were both subtle and powerful. In the end, the Council's reckoning was not about punishment revenge, or aggression. It was about understanding. Humans had acted decisively, independently, and with foresight. They had demonstrated that autonomy could be a source of strength, that careful planning could yield results more effectively than frantic diplomacy, and that unity and ethical action could create influence without coercion. The Council had witnessed the rise of a species that could no longer be underestimated, and that realization changed everything. As months turned into years, the galaxy slowly began to adjust to the new reality that humans had created. The Council's panic, once overwhelming, had evolved into a sober acknowledgement of humans' independence and influence. The initial fear had faded, replaced by a mix of respect, admiration, and cautious recalibration. Humans had not only survived their withdrawal from diplomacy, they had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of power, strategy, and autonomy. Humans continued to advance quietly but decisively. Their colonies expanded across distant systems, with settlements carefully planned for sustainability, security, and self-sufficiency. Trade networks became more sophisticated, connecting distant planets with speed and reliability. Humans demonstrated that independence was not isolation. It was a choice to operate on their own terms, while still engaging with the galaxy when it aligned with their values and interests. Technology became a cornerstone of this new era. Human engineers and scientists developed propulsion systems that were faster, more efficient, and safer than anything previously seen. Energy sources were refined, creating abundant and sustainable power for colonies and research stations alike. Defensive technology was improved, not for aggression, but for protection. Human systems were designed to detect and neutralize threats before they became serious, demonstrating foresight and preparedness rather than reckless force. The Council watched with unease as humans' capabilities grew. Representatives from many species realized that the independence humans had claimed was not temporary or symbolic. It was strategic and enduring. Humans were building a future that did not rely on the Council's approval or intervention. Every new development, every successful colony, and every technological innovation served as a reminder that humans were shaping the galaxy on their own terms. Despite their distance from formal diplomacy, humans maintained careful observation of galactic events. They monitored conflicts, alliances, trade, and technological progress, ensuring that they had the knowledge needed to respond if circumstances required it. Humans' intelligence networks were subtle yet effective, allowing them to understand the galaxy without becoming entangled in political disputes or power struggles. By staying informed, they could act decisively if necessary, yet remain independent, demonstrating a rare combination of vigilance and restraint. Other species began to adapt as well. Observing human success, some governments and communities sought to emulate aspects of human strategy. They focused on internal strength, technological innovation, and preparedness, realizing that relying solely on the Council or traditional alliances was no longer sufficient. Humans had created a new model for success, showing that independence, careful planning, and unity could achieve outcomes that diplomacy alone could not guarantee. Human society itself flourished under this new approach. Communities became tightly knit, working together to solve problems, share resources, and maintain morale. Education emphasized critical thinking, adaptability, and ethical responsibility, preparing future generations to contribute to society's growth. Leadership focused on competence, judgment, and collaboration rather than hierarchy or political loyalty. This structure allowed humans to act decisively, respond quickly to challenges, and sustain long-term goals without being slowed by bureaucracy or internal conflict. The Council, meanwhile, had entered a period of reflection and reassessment. Leaders now recognized that humans had shifted the balance of power not through aggression or coercion, but through strategy, foresight, and unity. Previous assumptions about control and influence no longer applied. Humans had proven that a society could shape galactic events without direct intervention, and that independence could be more powerful than formal authority. The Council was forced to adjust its strategies, alliances, and expectations in response. Humans' approach to diplomacy also evolved. While they had severed formal ties with the Council, they did not abandon all interaction with other species. Selective collaborations, scientific exchanges, and trade agreements continued, but always on terms that reflected human principles. This approach was deliberate. Humans demonstrated that cooperation was valuable, but only when it respected autonomy and ethical standards. Their choices communicated a clear message. Humans were partners when their interests aligned, but they could not be controlled, pressured, or ignored. The broader galaxy began to take notice. Humans were no longer simply a distant species. They had become a benchmark for resilience, independence, and strategic thinking. Stories of human ingenuity, efficiency, and foresight circulated widely, inspiring both admiration and caution. Leaders and citizens alike recognized that humans' ability to act decisively while remaining ethical and cooperative was rare among civilizations. Humans had not only survived, they had thrived in a complex, often hostile galaxy. The Council itself began to change in response. Policies were adjusted, alliances reconsidered, and strategies refined. While fear of human power had once dominated discussions, respect and understanding now played a larger role. Members realized that aggression or coercion was unlikely to succeed. Instead, observation, learning, and careful adaptation were more effective approaches. Humans' example demonstrated that true influence often came from competence, foresight, and principled action rather than formal authority alone. Humans' expansion into new systems also reinforced their influence. Every new colony was carefully chosen for strategic value, sustainability, and growth potential. Resources were managed responsibly, ensuring that human settlements could thrive independently. Exploration missions were designed not only to gather knowledge, but to establish presence and capability in regions previously thought difficult or inaccessible. Through these efforts, humans subtly reshaped the galaxy, demonstrating that independence could coexist with responsibility and foresight. Internally, human culture evolved as well. Communities focused on education, innovation, and collaboration. Individuals were encouraged to think critically, solve problems creatively, and contribute to society's goals. Ethical principles remained central, guiding decisions in technology, exploration, and diplomacy. This cultural foundation ensured that humans' independence was not just practical but sustainable, allowing society to thrive even as the galaxy around them changed. By this point, humans had transformed the perception of their species. They were no longer seen as unpredictable outsiders or secondary participants in galactic affairs. They were recognized as independent actors, capable of shaping events, building influence, and securing their future without reliance on the Council or other authorities. This recognition was not universal, and some species remained cautious or skeptical, but the overall shift in perception was profound. Humans had become a force that could not be ignored. The lasting impact of humans. Independence was not just strategic or political, it was philosophical. Other species began to question the assumptions that had governed galactic relations for centuries. They saw that autonomy, foresight, and unity could achieve outcomes that diplomacy, hierarchy, and coercion could not. Humans had demonstrated that strength was not measured by control over others, but by the ability to act decisively, ethically, and strategically on one's own terms. The Council eventually accepted a new reality. Humans would not return to conventional diplomacy, but their presence could not be ignored. Policies, strategies, and expectations had to be adjusted to account for a species that operated independently, strategically, and with foresight. The galaxy itself had changed. The Council no longer controlled the flow of events. Humans had become an influential force that reshaped priorities, alliances, and strategies across star systems. Humans' independence also inspired future generations. Young humans grew up understanding that autonomy, intelligence, and ethical responsibility were powerful tools. They learned that success came from careful planning, cooperation within their society, and strategic action rather than dependence on external approval. This cultural foundation ensured that the lessons of independence would endure, allowing humans to continue thriving even as the galaxy evolved. By the time the Council fully recognized the implications of humans' actions, it was clear that the galaxy had entered a new era. Humans had reshaped perceptions of power, influence, and strategy. They had demonstrated that independence could be a source of strength, foresight could be more effective than force, and unity within a society could outmatch the authority of centuries-old institutions. Their actions had lasting consequences, not just for the Council, but for every species in the galaxy. In the end, humans had accomplished what few others could. They had secured their future, demonstrated the power of independence, and inspired the galaxy to reconsider its assumptions about strength, strategy, and cooperation. The Council's panic had evolved into reflection, respect, and adaptation. Humans' quiet, deliberate, and principled approach had proven that influence did not require control, and that true power lay in the combination of intelligence, foresight, and ethical action. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Underestimate humans at your own risk. But more importantly, humans had shown that independence, when guided by strategy, ethics, and unity, was not only possible, it could reshape the future. The Council, other species, and even ordinary citizen